Diddy is completely losing his composure right now, going as far as demanding that a sexual assault accuser surrender his personal medical records. The sheer boldness of this move reveals everything about his current state of mind. This is a man who once commanded entire rooms and held the music industry in an iron grip for decades, yet he is now submitting court motions that make him appear undeniably guilty. He does not even seem to grasp how terrible this looks for him. The desperation is seeping through every court document and every public statement his legal team releases. Watching it unfold is honestly something to behold, because it signals that the walls are closing in around him and he is fully aware of it. The pattern I keep returning to is how Diddy's own conduct continuously confirms exactly what kind of person he truly is. Every time he speaks publicly, every time his attorneys file a new motion, he exposes more about his character than any accuser ever could on their own. Right now he is locked in a legal battle with a producer named Little Rodney, who is suing him for sexual assault and seeking $30 million in damages. Diddy's reaction to that lawsuit was to demand Rodney's medical records. Take a moment to fully absorb that. The individual being accused of committing assault is attempting to force his accuser into handing over private health information. What conceivable legitimate justification exists for that demand? What exactly does he plan to do with those records? Is he planning to manipulate them, leak them to media outlets, or hunt for some technicality that would humiliate this man enough to make him abandon his case? The level of entitlement on display here is breathtaking. This is someone who still genuinely believes he can dictate every narrative, control every person, and determine every outcome. Even while he is the one staring down multiple lawsuits from multiple alleged victims. According to the actual court documents, Diddy is arguing that Rodney failed to authorize a release of his medical records back in November, claiming the release that was submitted did not comply with existing privacy regulations. His legal team is characterizing Rodney's requests for information during discovery as abusive and improper. Let that truly sink in for a moment. The man fighting for his reputation against allegations of sexual assault is labeling the victim's request for information as abusive. The projection embedded in that framing is so loud it is practically deafening. Diddy is also refusing to answer any questions related to Cuba Gooding Jr., whom Rodney claims was present and involved in one of the assaults that allegedly occurred aboard Diddy's yacht. Diddy's legal team contends that pursuing information about third parties like Cuba Gooding Jr. is improper. Of course they want to keep Cuba out of this. Cuba Gooding Jr. is exactly the type of person who would sacrifice anyone to maintain his standing with wealthy and powerful friends. Someone who would look the other way at anything happening right in front of him if it meant preserving access to the people funding his lifestyle. An ordinary employee versus a wealthy A-list associate with powerful connections. Cuba would have handled whatever Diddy needed handled without hesitation. And what is truly striking about the entire Little Rodney situation is that Diddy should consider himself fortunate this man is not pursuing criminal charges the way others are. Jonathan Hay is already collaborating with the district attorney's office and pushing for criminal accountability. Rodney chose the civil litigation route, and Diddy's response to that relative restraint is to demand his medical records as if he himself has been wronged. This is the behavior of a person who has never been told no throughout his entire life. Someone who genuinely cannot wrap his mind around the reality that he is not the victim in this story. The more demands he makes, the more public statements his team releases, the more it becomes apparent that this ship is taking on serious water. No amount of legal maneuvering is going to keep it afloat indefinitely. The most recent development that has Diddy visibly spiraling is a lawsuit involving a child actor, and this particular case has clearly pushed him to the edge. You can tell it has rattled him deeply because he has started issuing his own public statements rather than leaving everything to his attorneys. He described his accuser as sitting on a throne of lies. Those were his literal words. A throne of lies. What kind of serious legal response even sounds like that? It reads like dialogue from a cartoon antagonist. He followed that dramatic phrase with his standard denial package, calling everything completely fabricated, insisting he has never assaulted anyone. Claiming these allegations will be disproven in court just like all the others, and vowing to pursue every available avenue to defend himself and hold the people he calls liars accountable. But here is the fundamental problem with Diddy's denials at this stage. We have already witnessed this exact playbook, and it fell apart publicly in spectacular fashion. When Cassie originally filed her lawsuit, Diddy was out there emphatically rejecting every claim. He posted statements, he went on social media, he performed outrage at anyone who would dare fabricate stories about him. That was his energy and his posture throughout that period. Then the hotel hallway surveillance footage surfaced. The video showing him assaulting Cassie, dragging her body across the floor, and kicking her while she was down. Suddenly all the righteous outrage evaporated completely. Suddenly he was posting tearful reflections about confronting the darkest periods of his life, hitting rock bottom, acknowledging that his behavior was inexcusable, expressing disgust at himself, and describing how he sought professional help through therapy and rehabilitation while asking God for mercy and grace. Every bit of that performed remorse only materialized after he was caught on camera. Before the footage emerged, the story was lies and defamation. After the footage could not be suppressed, the story became tearful apologies and spiritual awakening. So when Diddy now stands before the public denying allegations involving minors, young boys, and child actors, what rational reason exists to believe a single word he says? The Cassie situation established beyond any reasonable doubt that his default instinct is always to lie, always to attack whoever is accusing him, and always to cast himself as the real victim. The remorse and honesty only surface when the evidence becomes so overwhelming that continued denial becomes completely untenable. And the child actor lawsuit contains graphic details that Diddy was clearly terrified would ever see the light of day. These are the cases he was genuinely most afraid of. These are the accusations that would permanently destroy any remaining possibility of him returning to the entertainment world. There is a meaningful distinction between being a problematic romantic partner and being accused of what he is being accused of now. One you can potentially recover from over time with the right public relations strategy. The other follows a person permanently, renders them radioactive, and makes it impossible for anyone in any industry to associate with them professionally or personally. Diddy knew these lawsuits were being prepared. He knew they existed behind closed doors, waiting for precisely the right moment to be filed. That is the source of his rage. That is why he is publicly unraveling. And this is not how innocent people respond when falsely accused. Innocent people tend to feel confused and hurt and channel their energy into clearing their names through appropriate legal processes. Diddy is exhibiting the fury of someone who is losing control of a situation he spent decades carefully constructing elaborate walls around. Los Angeles was his territory in a particular sense, and Miami as well. These were environments where he believed he could operate with impunity, where the entertainment industry would shield him and people would deliberately avoid asking inconvenient questions because everyone was too consumed with chasing fame and money. The attorney handling the child actor case is the same attorney representing Jonathan Hay. There are almost certainly additional lawsuits being prepared. This lawyer has other cases positioned and ready to file, other alleged victims who have been waiting in the shadows watching to see whether it is safe to step forward. Every new public filing creates more safety for the next person considering coming forward. Each lawsuit that moves through the legal system emboldens someone else who has been holding onto their own account for years, perhaps even decades. Diddy understands this reality. He knows there are more people out there, more allegations waiting to become public. That knowledge is the real engine powering his rage. It is not the righteous indignation of a man who has been falsely accused. It is the fury of someone who constructed his entire existence on the assumption that his alleged victims would remain silent forever. And now that assumption is collapsing in real time before his eyes. The connection to Los Angeles and Miami makes perfect sense when you consider how the entertainment industry operates in those cities. New York was where Diddy built his public-facing identity, the Bad Boy Records empire, the legitimate business persona. But Los Angeles and Miami were where the private events happened. The after-parties, the exclusive gatherings where normal boundaries dissolved and anything could occur far from the scrutiny of the New York media environment. Los Angeles is essentially a company town where everyone fears losing access or being blacklisted from opportunities. Miami carries that same transient, permissive energy where people flow in and out constantly, where tourists mix with locals, and where chaos provides convenient cover. Diddy made deliberate choices about where to operate and why. The NBC lawsuit defeat does not receive nearly enough attention in discussions about his history. Diddy sued a major broadcasting network and lost that case. That is a significant public embarrassment for someone whose entire identity revolves around winning and being untouchable. Every courtroom loss, every denied motion, every statement that backfires and makes things worse, it all accumulates. The image of the invincible mogul is steadily being replaced by the reality of a man who can no longer control anything. Not the public narrative, not the legal proceedings, not public perception. His children represent a complicated dimension of all of this. They have maintained public loyalty to him, but the questions surrounding Kim Porter's death have never gone away. There are people who have believed for years that Diddy bears some responsibility for what happened to her, and those voices are growing louder as everything else continues to unravel. What happens when investigators begin examining that case again with fresh perspective and fresh motivation? What happens when people who were previously too afraid to speak suddenly feel emboldened by the cascading wave of other allegations? Diddy's children have to carry all of this with them. They have to process what their father is being accused of and somehow reconcile the men who raised them with the person being described in these legal documents. The medical records demand is destined to fail. It simply has to. No judge in a functioning legal system is going to force a sexual assault victim to surrender private health information to the person accused of assaulting them. Privacy protections exist for precisely this kind of situation. Diddy's attorneys can file motions indefinitely and characterize Rodney's discovery requests as abusive from now until the end of time. But the optics of doing so are catastrophic and the legal foundation for the demand is fragile at best. This is a strategy designed to stall, to intimidate, to make the litigation process so exhausting and invasive that Rodney might choose to abandon his case simply to escape the ordeal. But $30 million provides powerful motivation to keep fighting. And the other accusers are not retreating either. The child actor case continues moving forward through the courts. Jonathan Hay is actively pushing for criminal charges. Each passing week seems to deliver a new filing, a new allegation, or a new crack in whatever protective structure Diddy managed to construct around himself over the years. Diddy is unraveling publicly because he is finally encountering genuine consequences and he has absolutely no framework for navigating that reality. His entire life has been engineered around avoiding exactly this moment, and now that it has arrived, all of his accumulated money, power, and connections cannot make it disappear. The video of his apology following the Cassie footage should be mandatory viewing for anyone who is still inclined to accept his denials at face value. Watch him carefully in that footage. Observe the calculated nature of the remorse, the precise word choices, the way he discusses hitting rock bottom and seeking therapeutic help and finding renewed faith. Then remember that just weeks before recording that apology, he was publicly calling Cassie a liar. Remember that he only acknowledged the truth after the evidence became impossible to hide or spin. Now apply that documented pattern to every other accusation he currently faces. The child actor, Little Rodney, and whoever steps forward next. Diddy's denials carry no credibility whatsoever. The only thing that has ever compelled him toward honesty is video evidence he was incapable of suppressing or discrediting. And here we are watching him rage against the collapse of his reputation. Demanding medical records from accusers, labeling them liars in increasingly erratic public statements, and maneuvering desperately to avoid answering questions about Cuba Gooding Jr. and whatever allegedly occurred on that yacht. The ship is sinking, not fully beneath the surface yet, but low enough that the waterline is visible to everyone watching. Criminal charges would represent the final blow that completes the destruction. The district attorney is watching. Law enforcement is watching. The general public is watching. Diddy knows this. And that awareness is precisely why he cannot stop making outrageous demands and filing motions and releasing statements that consistently make his situation look worse with each passing day. When Diddy behaves this way, when he releases these desperate public statements and hurls outrageous legal demands at the people suing him, it is actually encouraging. It means he is not getting what he wants. It means the system that shielded and enabled him for decades is finally, however reluctantly, beginning to function as it should. He is never going to obtain those medical records. He is never going to reclaim his reputation. All that remains available to him is continued rage, continued demands, and continued denial until the next piece of evidence surfaces, the next witness decides to speak, or the next criminal charge is formally filed. And based on the current trajectory of events, that moment may arrive sooner than anyone is currently anticipating.